Good morning and welcome to the Atlantic Council. I'm Jason Marzak, director of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center, and I would like to give una cálida bienvenida to Colombia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carlos Olmes Trujillo. Minister, great you could join us this morning for this incredibly timely conversation. Thank you as well to Judy Woodruff of the PBS Newshour for joining us to moderate this morning's discussion with the Foreign Minister. Colombia rightly generates much interest in Washington, and I'm also delighted that the United States Institute of Peace, the Inter-American Dialogue, and the Wilson Center are partnering with us for today's events. A strong US-Colombia relationship is of top importance to the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center, and in particular for our founder, Adrienne Arsht, who is a true champion for Colombia. This is a relationship that extends beyond bilateral interests. The U.S. and Colombia must work together in solving key issues and do work together in solving key issues across Latin America and beyond, most notably today in Venezuela. Setting out this vision for the U.S.-Colombia partnership, a new vision that builds off the success of Plan Colombia, is the charge of our U.S.-Colombia Task Force, which is co-chaired by Senators Roy Blunt and Ben Cardin, and with, among its members, counts the partner institutions for today's event. Mr. Minister, I appreciate your support of this effort, and as we prepare to release the findings in the next couple of months, it's our intention that they serve as a roadmap for the future. Colombia is one of the U.S.'s strongest allies, and today's conversation is an opportunity to look at how the government of President Duque is addressing many of the challenges it inherited just over a year ago. That extends from increased coca cultivation to Venezuela, a country ruled by a kleptocratic dictator who steals from his people and represses them every day. Accelerating a peaceful democratic transition in Venezuela is a top priority for the Atlantic Council, and I know for Colombia as well. And thank you, Mr. Minister, for all that you and Colombia are doing to return Venezuela to the Venezuelan people. Thank you very much for all that you're doing in that regard. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Colombia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carlos Olmes Trujillo. Minister Trujillo, now almost 1 year on the job, has an illustrious career before being named to this current post, including serving as ambassador to the European Union, the Organization of American States, as well as ambassador to Russia, Iceland, and Austria. His accomplishments in just under 1 year as minister are utterly impressive. I'm also thrilled to welcome as well Judy Woodruff, the anchor and managing editor of the PBS Newshour. She's covered politics and other news for more than 4 decades at NBC, CNN, and PBS. She's also where I and much of the United States, and I think most of this room, turn every night for very thoughtful analysis on the top issues facing the world every day. Judy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today as well. Before turning over, I encourage all of those who are here today and watching online to follow and participate in the live tweeting of the event using the hashtag #ACColombia. With that, it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Colombia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carlos Olmes Trujillo, and Judy Woodruff. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. What time do you want us to wrap up? 9:45 for sure. Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much to the Atlantic Council for inviting me. It's my honor to be here to have this discussion this morning with Minister Trujillo. There's a lot to talk about. You have a very full plate. We've just come from another conversation where you've been discussing some of it between your dealing with the challenges of the drug trade, the drug crisis in your country, dealing with the implementation of the FARC agreement, dealing with what is going on next door in Venezuela and how that's affecting your country, not to mention so many other issues. My first question to you is, what is the problem that keeps you most awake at night? What do you most worry about of all of these many headaches?
All of them together. All of them together. The Venezuelan situation is quite a huge challenge to us because the impact that is being felt daily in our country. You know, having already 1,500,000 Venezuelans coming into Colombia is a challenge that goes beyond our capacity to face it.
And it's 1.5 million.
1.5 million already, very close to 1.5 million, but the greatest source of concern is that the problem and the challenge is growing every day, and the numbers, the scenarios with which we work are all of them a source of great concern. If things keep on being as they are today, the number might go up to 1,800,000. And if there is a catastrophe in Venezuela, our calculations show that the number might be of 3,500,000 Venezuelans coming into Colombia. So that is why, since the first day of Duque's administration, we reach out the region and the world to say, hey, this is not a Colombian issue. This is a regional issue, and this has a global impact. So please help us to appointing a high official in order to coordinate international actions in Colombia. The response was rapid, and the Dr. Eduardo Stein was appointed, and we put in motion what we call the Quito process in order to harmonize measures in the region. So that is no doubt about one of the main challenges that we are facing.
Your country initially was very welcoming of the Venezuelan migrants. You opened your doors in the face of this crisis next door. How many Venezuelans can Colombia handle?
It's very difficult to say. Very difficult to say. The policy is not going to change. We are receiving Venezuelans with a sense of solidarity, with a sense of, with a humanitarian attitude, and with a sense of historical gratitude as well. So we cannot decide how many Venezuelans are going to come into Colombia. Borders are open, so the point is how to get more international cooperation, how to better harmonize regional measures in order to face this regional migration crisis, and how to call a more deep international attention into the situation in order to get, as I mentioned briefly before, more international cooperation.
How worried are you about the attitudes of the Colombian people toward the Venezuelans?
We are concerned. We are concerned. So far, Venezuelans have been received with a sense of, with a humanitarian sense, but there is no doubt in the sense that problems start to be being present in several regions of the country, and we have an important source of concern, which is that we are going through a period of elections, regional elections. And we have the concern that this issue of migration might become politicized in a bad way. We hope that it won't happen, but the risk is there.
You've mentioned at several points already the need Colombia has for international help. Are you getting the help you need? What exactly do you need from the international community, and especially from the United States? You're here in Washington.
You know, we are very grateful because of the help of the United States. I have to be very clear about that. But we need more international cooperation. Money to feed the health services, money to feed the education services that are receiving a lot of Venezuelans every day. So more financial cooperation is needed, more technical cooperation is needed, more humanitarian presence is needed in our country. Can you imagine the effort that a country like Colombia has to make in order to attend 1,500,000 Venezuelans as of today? This is attending a city larger than Cartagena from one day to the other. That is a huge challenge that we are facing.
What do you expect to get from Washington, from the United States, from this visit, on this visit to help Colombia with the Venezuelans?
No, the conversation with the United States is constant, is permanent. The United States knows very well our situation. We are receiving a lot of help from the United States, so I am here in order to keep on strengthening this bilateral relationship, which is fundamental to us.
Is there something specific, though, that you would look to the United States to do now?
We are exchanging opinions very closely about the Venezuelan situation. I came to give more information about the results of the effort that President Duque is making in order to bring down 200,000 hectares of illicit crops.
And I want to ask you about that. But
I brought more information about the number of seizures of cocaine and cocaine base that have taken place. What does it mean for Colombia? What does it mean for the United States? So this is a constant relationship. And I'm here because we have a Lima Group meeting in July 23rd in Buenos Aires, and then there is going to be a larger meeting of countries that recognize Guaidó in Lima, August the 6th. So consultation is a need nowadays.
before we move to the coca issue and related conversation. I think for many Americans, the situation in Venezuela has dropped off the radar. It's not getting the daily or almost daily attention that it was getting for a while. Where does it stand? I mean, for a few months ago, it looked as if Mr. Guaido might be in a position to move, but that hasn't happened. Where do things stand right now from your perspective?
Our perspective is the following. We see this as a process. Dictatorship never fall from one day to the other. Dictatorships fall because a series of conditions are created that lead to the end of tyrannies and dictatorships. And I think that we have made a lot of advances politically and diplomatically. If you think about what we had at the beginning of the year, the situation today is completely different. At the beginning of the year, nobody talked about the possibility of having an interim president in Venezuela. Now there is one, and a very prestigious one, Juan Guaido. At the beginning of the year, nobody talked about the possibility of close to 60 countries recognizing that interim president. Today, close to 60 countries recognize Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. At the beginning of the year, nobody talked about the possibility that the person nominated by that interim president might become the representative of Venezuela in the Organization of American States. Now, the person who represents Venezuela in the Organization of American States is the person nominated by Guaido. At the beginning of the year, nobody talked about the possibility of Venezuela being represented in the Inter-American Development Bank by the person nominated by Guaido. Today, the person who represents Venezuela in the Inter-American Development Bank is the person nominated by the interim president Juan Guaido. At the beginning of the year, nobody talked about the possibility of the opposition being united around a person like Juan Guaido. Today, the opposition has been united around the figure of Juan Guaido. And there are many other things. This is to say that the conditions are being created, that every day there is a new condition that is being created, and that leads us to believe that sooner than later, the conditions will exist so that democracy can be again back in Venezuela.
But is it fair to say it's proven more difficult than many people believed, in terms of the military changing its allegiance, in terms of not expecting the Russian involvement to be as serious as it's been?
No, frankly speaking, we always believed that it was going to be very difficult, because that is a dictatorship that has been in power for so many years. For so many years. So this is not an easy thing to do, but the change is great. And we frankly believe that the conditions are being created. We are optimistic in that sense.
How concerned are you about the Russian role in Venezuela?
Yes, there is a source of concern, but the position that the Lima Group has taken is reaching out to those countries, believing that they may be of some help in this process that I just have mentioned. So the Lima Group has made a decision to reach out to Russia, to China, to Turkey. There are even some members of the Lima Group talking to Cuba. I frankly believe that this has to be a Latin American solution, a regional solution. I believe that we have to be in close contact with the contact group, the European contact group, in the sense that there is a fundamental agreement looking for new elections in Venezuela. We have a difference. The difference is how to get there, but the basic agreement is very easy to identify. So the Colombian position is making an effort in order to maintain the critical mass of support for new and fair and free elections in Venezuela altogether.
And before we leave Venezuela, what should the U.S. role be in Venezuela?
The role that the United States is playing. Sanctions are producing a very important impact in the situation in Venezuela. Consultation with countries like Colombia, with countries of the Lima Group. The United States is a very important country in our region. Just to speak about our region, the United States is a member of the Organization of American States. We all abide the Inter-American Democratic Charter, so we are working together. We have to work together. We have worked together in the past in order to restore democracy wherever it has been broken down or challenged. So the role of the United States is fundamental. Seeing it if you look at it in the bilateral terms, in multilateral terms, and in regional terms. It's a fundamental role.
But again, to emphasize your view is this has to be a regional solution. It has to come from.
Yes, of course. There's no other way. No other way. Who is feeling the impact of the situation in Venezuela? Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Argentina. So the solution has to be a regional solution. Why are we acting as we do? Because we are members of the Organization of American States and we have the duty to do that. The legal and political duty to do what we are doing. And we are signatories of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. So this has to be a regional solution.
Let's talk about the one of the other things that keeps you awake at night, and that is, what to do about the coca industry, the illegal drug industry in your country. I think the sense was some years ago that this was improving, but we now know that since President Duque came into office, there's now more coca planted than there was before. Where does it stand? Help us understand why this is such a difficult problem.
First of all, what President Duque inherited were 208,000 hectares of illicit crops. Some years back, we, thanks to a huge effort, got to brought those 160,000 hectares of illicit crops to close to 40,000. Then, due to decisions taken by the previous government, that number of hectares went up to a figure that we have never lived through before. So, what President Duque has made since the very first day of his administration is to face in a very strong way this situation in order first to stabilize the number of hectares and then to try to bring them down. The results are amazing since the first day of the administration. Close to 40,000 hectares have been eradicated this year. I'm speaking about January, July 2019. The goal this year is to eradicate 80,000 hectares of illicit crops, and that is done through several ways. Forced manual eradication conducted by the armed forces, forced manual eradication made by the public force, illicit crops ground spraying eradication program carried out by the national police. All of them have been very successful, as has been acknowledged by the latest figures made public by the United States government. We are waiting for the result of the CIMSI, this United Nations. So things are moving on well, and we are going to keep on doing all we can in the strongest possible way. As far as the international view of the issue has to do, we are going back to the multilateral scenario to strengthen back again the principle of shared responsibility and the integral view in order to fight the world drug problem. So, a lot of national action, of course with the help and support of the United States, and again, in the international scenario, principle of shared responsibility and integral view against the world drug problem.
Why are the farmers, what's the incentive for the farmers to continue to grow? I mean, there was a plan to try to persuade them to make it economically wiser for them not to grow coca, but that hasn't fully worked out.
No, that is one of the key elements of the strategy: alternative development, new crops, and there is one fundamental issue that I would like to mention, which is the following: opening up world markets for those products is fundamental. This is a matter of actual return. So there are many poor peasants in that situation. Alternative programs are put in motion. Those programs have been successful in some areas of the country, so we have to keep on working in that. Illegal crop substitution and alternative development programs.
But is that turning out to be more difficult than everyone thought? That everyone in your government thought it would be?
No, it has always been difficult. It has always been difficult, The challenge of facing the wardrobe problem is not a minor thing for any country. Look at what is happening with consumption. Consumption is going up, and not consumption of cocaine, consumption of new substances. The issue in the United States in that sense is a source of concern for everyone. So that is why the shared responsibility concept has to be strengthened back. And that is why the view of integral action against the world drug problem is fundamental. Allow me to explain this a little bit more. Wherever there is production, a huge fight against production has to be made. Wherever there is transportation, an important fight against transportation has to be made. Where there is money laundering, fight against money laundering has to take place. Where there is a deviation of chemical precursors, a fight against deviation of chemical precursors has to take place. Wherever there is consumption, a fight against consumption has to take place. That is the integral view against the world drug problem. That is to say, we all, every country that has to do with any link of the change has to work very strongly in order to combat it.
When President Trump a few months ago was critical of President Duque for not doing enough, he said words to the effect he hasn't done anything that the U.S. wanted or enough for the U.S. Was that a fair comment?
No, it wasn't fair at all. It wasn't fair at all. We are doing a lot. But lately, President Trump says that he knows that President Duque is doing well. So we are doing the utmost effort. Why? Because we have to do it. We have to do it as a nation. We have to do it as a member of the international community. Facts are there. So the important point is doing along with other countries the greatest possible effort in order to face a problem that is a world problem, not a Colombian problem, a world problem.
And right now, what more do you need the U.S. to be doing to help Colombia with this?
We are always consulting. We are working together. This is a common objective. So we are receiving permanently help of the United States. We are sharing our concerns. We are sharing our successes. We are sharing our failures whenever they take place. So the point is keep on working together. That is the main issue as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned. Working together.
And I should mention that we're leaving 10 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. So I'm watching the clock, and we're going to, I think, 9:35. I'm going to turn it over to all of you. But I do want to ask you about one aspect of it. You mentioned spraying. There's been a controversy about that, as you know. One of the agents being used, glyphosate, is believed to be a carcinogen. Your President Duque's predecessor stopped using it. President Duque started to use it again. Why?
You know, the issue is that it was used and it was useful. It was successful in the past. Now the Constitutional Court of Colombia put the requirement to fulfilling some protocols. So the government of President Duque is doing an effort in order to respect those protocols and go back to aerial spraying, which is very useful in this fight against illicit drugs. But it is one element. We have, of course, as well, forced eradication programs, manual eradication programs, low height spraying in some particular regions. So we have to use all possible tools in order to face the problem, and of course aerial spraying is one of them, very important one. But we have to fulfill the requirements put by the Constitutional Court of Colombia.
But do you worry about the potential cancer aspect of this?
The point is that there is a lot of different scientific evidences about that. And one of the main sources of concern is that one of the protocols of the Constitutional Court says we need evidence that it is not a source of danger for human life. It is not a source of cancer. So it's impossible to find an evidence in that sense, as it is impossible to find an evidence that whatever you take cannot cause cancer. So the glyphosate, this is not a debate about the herbicide. in our case. This is a debate about a national security issue. This is a debate about our democracy. This is a debate about human rights respect. This is a debate about credibility in the institutions. This is a debate about fight against corruption. So this is a debate about the source of harm, as it has been the Woodruff problem in my country.
You know that some other governments have banned glyphosate.
Some are banned, some accept the use of glyphosate. And glyphosate is being used in Colombia in a lot of legal crops without any problem.
The FARC agreement, it was signed in 2016. We are here 3 years later, new president of Colombia. It has not been fully implemented. Explain the process that's taken place and why the interpretation of the agreement is changing.
First of all, what is the policy? The policy is the implementation of the agreement, introducing some changes for the future, for the implementation of the said agreement, through political consensus and institutional means. Why is that the policy? That is the policy because that is the mandate that President Duque received from Colombians. How many times that mandate has been given? Several times. First, when the no vote won the plebiscite. Second, in the internal selection process in the Center Democratic Party in order to elect a presidential candidate. Third, in a popular consultation that took place to elect one candidate of 3 different political forces. Fourth, in the first round of presidential elections. Fifth, in the second round of presidential elections. The policy was implementation of the agreement with changes for the future through political consensus and institutional means. For you to have more clarity about this, allow me to share this information. The negotiator of the agreement was a presidential candidate himself. What was his proposal? To implement the agreement in the exact terms in which the agreement had been negotiated. He got 400,000 votes with that proposal. So the difference is Duque, 10,200,000 votes, Humberto de la Calle, very respectable Colombian, 400,000 votes. So that is why the implementation policy with changes for the future through consensus, political consensus, and institutional means is the policy that is being applied by President Duque.
And what part of it, explain from your perspective, what are the principal parts of the agreement that aren't working, that have to be changed?
First, narco-trafficking and kidnapping cannot be considered as crimes connected to political crimes. Second, sexual crimes committed against childs cannot be under special jurisdiction for peace, but has to be under the ordinary jurisdiction of Colombia. Meaning that
how treated?
Meaning that sexual crimes committed against childs cannot receive judicial benefits that are considered into the special jurisdiction for peace. Third, crimes committed after the date in which the agreement was signed has to be investigated by the ordinary jurisdiction in Colombia, ordinary justice, and not by the special jurisdiction for peace. Fourth, a member of FARC that has goods or resources that were not declared at the due opportunity will have to receive severe penalties. Fifth, a member of FARC that belongs to Congress and is found guilty by the special jurisdiction for peace of grave crimes will have to retire from Congress. But in such a case, the political party FARC will have the capacity to say who is going to replace that person. Those are the 5 changes.
And in other words, the original agreement will never be implemented, is what you're saying, because of the
No, on the contrary, it is being implemented. It is being implemented nowadays.
But with these changes,
there are some changes. Yeah. You know, the agreement is a 310 pages agreement that touches upon each and every sector of Colombian society. And we are proposing 5 changes that are fundamental for the future, not backwards. So those changes are not going touch the body of the agreement. So today, the agreement is being implemented, and some changes are going to be proposed.
Several things. Where right now do your discussions with the United States on the whole question of extradition stand?
Extradition?
Yeah.
No. We fully agree on the extradition treaty. We believe in the need of the extradition treaty with the United States. So we fully agree, and we want very, very, very strong extradition, because we know that it is a very important tool of judicial cooperation.
How popular? What do you hear from the people of Colombia about the FARC agreement right now? What do you hear from the people you talk to?
Let me tell you the following: the no vote won the plebiscite. President Duque, with the proposal that I mentioned to you, won the election. So what have we been looking for by introducing those changes through political consensus and institutional means? What we have been looking for is to give sustainability and durability and popular support to the agreement that it has lacked of.
And what does that mean in terms of how your government is addressing it?
Implementing the agreement and looking for the changes that were proposed to the Colombian people and that the Colombian people accepted when voted for Duque in such a huge amount of votes. You know, Duque was elected with the highest number of votes in democratic history of Colombia.
I have much more I'd love to ask you. I know there's a lot going on in your country, but I'm getting the signal it's time to turn over the question to the audience. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. If you would stand up and identify yourself and then ask your question. This gentleman right here.
Mr. President, that was superb. Mr. Minister, that was superb. I'm Timothy Towell, 30 years in the State Department, that's positive. Negative, 30 years, all dictatorships, and in the last century. So I have a last century mentality, as does a number of my colleagues here. I love your talking about peaceful transition in solving the relationship with your powerful neighbor, Venezuela. But what about thinking about last century's concepts, where you sometimes used stuff that we studied in the university about using force? Wall Street Journal yesterday about the ELN working closely with the government of Venezuela. Why can't you get people who know how to do 19th century things like shooting people? Why can't you go on the border and go after them? And when they flee to Venezuela, international law, they're lawyers here, cross the river and follow them and shoot at them. And if you get to Caracas, gee whiz, they're drug traffickers and corrupt military people that don't salute Guaido. If they're accidentally killed, gee whiz, that's too bad. You don't need a Yankee there. This is a hemisphere and world problem, as you said. Why not do it, sir?
Thank you, Timothy. No, I'm waiting for more questions. Just to have a package to answer.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, no. Can I take some more?
You want to take several questions at one
sure.
time? All right, right here. I think they're going to bring you a mic.
Thank you, Catalina Casas from the Wilson Center. How can Colombia share more of the responsibility on coca when most of the focus of the bilateral relationship has been on supply side and production and less on demand?
I'm making a note of this so we can come back to it. Let's see. Yes, right here.
Hello, Jimena Sanchez from the Washington Office on Latin America. What steps are you taking to address the impunity issue when it comes to the killing of social leaders and Afro-Colombian and Indigenous communities that are having issues in terms of protection?
I'm sorry. Impunity issue in the killing. Say it again. in the killing of social leaders in the, okay, Afro-Colombian, got it, okay. Yes, let's see, right here, yes, sir.
Thank you. James Lambert from the Organization of American States. Thank you, Minister, for the very successful General Assembly that you recently hosted in Medellin and the strong steps that were taken on Venezuela and Nicaragua there. My question is regarding the ongoing process of negotiation on Venezuela. There have been failed attempts which have been dragged out by the Maduro usurper administration before to negotiate. There's currently a Norwegian driven together with some Caribbean countries, Uruguay and the European Contact Group effort that's going on in Barbados. Are you, do you believe that there are prospects for success to this, or do you think that the Maduro administration is again dragging its feet through using a negotiation process?
Okay, see, right, way back in the back, white dress.
Hola, Yasmín López de Voz de América. Por favor, díganos, sabemos que hay miembros del ELN que ahora que son venezolanos. Usted nos hablaba de fronteras abiertas. ¿Podría darnos una descripción de cómo la crisis en Venezuela está afectando la propia crisis en Colombia y su proceso de paz? Y una segunda pregunta. ¿Cree usted que las sanciones sobre el petróleo realmente están contribuyendo a reducir la crisis en Venezuela, ya que algunos creen que lo que está haciendo es empobrecer a la población venezolana?
Somebody give me an English translation of the question. I'm sorry. Okay. And maybe one more, and then we're going to give the minister a chance to answer these questions. Right here. Yeah.
Thank you both for being here this morning. My name is Julie Montoya from Palladium. The question is for the minister, how can the United States government best support Colombia in the next coming weeks?
Okay. I think I took notes on these. The only one I didn't get was the one in Spanish. My apology. But let's start with the first one. The gentleman was asking why not use force.
Timothy, I understand your concern. But we, as I mentioned, we are acting out of the political and legal duties that we have as members of the Organization of American States and signatories of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We fully believe in political and diplomatic means. The evaluation that we make today is that those political and diplomatic actions are being successful. Just look at the results. And we believe that strengthening that political and diplomatic action will finally lead to a point in which Venezuelans are going to live back in democracy and freedom. So that is our way of action, and thank you for your concern. Catalina, that is why we are going back to the multilateral scenario to strengthen back the principle.
This is a question about the coca.
Yeah. To strengthen back the issue, the concept of shared responsibility and the integral view in the fight against the world drug problem. So all links has to be tackled, has to be fought at the same time with different measures in accordance to the feature of that particular link. But the idea is, and that is why we are doing what we are doing, the idea is facing all those links at the same time. That is what the world agreed to do years back. Those concepts has been weakening, and we want to strengthen that back because we fully believe in the usefulness of acting in such a way. Social leaders, that is a source of concern to us as well. It's a very great source of concern. We are very well aware that we have to work even more in order to strengthen all measures of protection to social leaders. That is the policy of President Duque government. There are a lot of action plans that has been established, that are being put in motion, integral security system, the particular action plan in order to defend social leaders. And as has to do with former FARC members, there are a list of 23 measures that have been recently been taken in order to guarantee the protection of those former FARC members. My friend from the Organization of American States, thank you for having had the assembly in Colombia. We fully enjoyed it, and we know that that was a very successful assembly in political terms. Norway, to be frank, we don't believe. We don't believe in that. We support the itinerary of President Guaidó, that is to say, end of usurpation, transition, calling of elections. We believe that a negotiation will be useful only to Maduro. They know how to use negotiations. They have done in the past. We cannot rule out that they are going to use these new negotiations again to gain time, to cool down political process, to divide the opposition. So we fully believe that the real way to get back to democracy and freedom in Venezuela is through the fulfillment of the itinerary that was designed by interim President Juan Guaidó. We are going to go to the coming meeting of the Lima Group. We hope that that meeting will give back new strength to international support to Guaidó and all the democratic forces in Venezuela, and we will keep on acting, as I mentioned before, in political and diplomatic terms.
I was given a translation on the question from the journalist. The first one was, what about the ELN that is operating in Venezuela with Venezuela's participation?
Yo creo que usted quiere la respuesta en español, se la voy a dar en español y luego I'm going to answer in Spanish. She needs the answer in Spanish and I will then go back to English. El régimen de Maduro siempre ha estado abierto a la acción de actividades de organizaciones terroristas colombianas desde ese territorio contra los intereses de Colombia. El ELN, hay jefes del ELN y miembros del ELN que actúan desde Venezuela contra Colombia. Los vínculos que existen entre ese régimen y esa organización terrorista colombiana, además del vínculo que el régimen tiene con otras organizaciones terroristas del mundo, es evidente. Y eso lo denuncia Colombia permanentemente como una fuente de peligro real contra los intereses colombianos. Y naturalmente, todos los actos violentos que se produzcan desde Venezuela contra Colombia afectan lo que es el ambiente de convivencia y de paz que los colombianos deseamos tener. You know, I was telling her that we are always denouncing the links between the Maduro's regime and terrorist organizations, be they Colombian organizations, as the ELN is, and other international organizations, that that country, under the Maduro's regime, has been open to the action of Colombian terrorist organizations, and that any act of violence coming from terrorist organizations acting in Venezuela against Colombia, of course, do affect the search for peace that we are aiming at in Colombia. Sanctions, we believe in sanctions, focused sanctions, sanctions put to people close to the regime, and we are going to propose more sanctions in the coming Lima Group meeting that will take place July the 23rd. I'm speaking about sanctions of the Lima Group members.
That was with regard to U.S. sanctions on Venezuela.
Yeah, that's correct. And United States, more support, more closeness. You know, the relationship with the United States is a very close relationship. It's a very fluid one. It's a great relationship. We have common interest, and we are going to keep on acting in coincidence and together with the United States.
Anybody else? I think our time is up. Thank you to the Atlantic Council for hosting this conversation. Thank you to Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.